Welcome to Buckets. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm joined by Andrew O'Connor Watts. You can find him on Twitter and the Action Network at NBA Watts. And Albert Wynn, he's the Analytic Capper. You can find him on Twitter and the Action Network app at Analytics Capper. This is your 2024 NBA win totals best bets episode. We've done a lot on win totals. We have a lot more to come on win totals. We're going to do best bets all throughout next week. You're going to hear a lot more of those, but I want to get the fellas on to really dive deep into some of their best bets after we did the win totals draft here on the pod yesterday. Make sure to go check that out, as it was an awesome episode with the fellas, but we're going to get a little bit more gritty here with some actual bets and value here on the show. As a reminder, everything we talk about can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. It's the best way for you to track your picks. You get up to second information on where the bets and money are coming in on. If you sign up for Action Pro, you're going to get the instant updates from our key contributors, guys like Sean Kerner and Brandon Anderson and Chris Raybon, so you can get those picks and get in there before the market moves. Make sure to check it out. Also, make sure you go to youtube.com/the Action Network. We'd love to see our subs go up on Action Network before the start of the NBA season. Go over there and let them know how much you love Buckets. It's the best way for you to support the show. Head on over to youtube.com, like our videos, and hit the subscribe button for the Action Network. All right, fellas, we'll get started. I want to know your best bets up front. I know that we've got one in common between the two of you. We'll hit that one up front. I want to know what your best bets are, and then we'll dive into the handicaps. Albert Wynn, the Analytics Capper, let's start with you. What are your 2024 NBA win total best bets?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'm going to have three. I like the OKC Thunder over 56.5 wins. Another team that I'm going to be on the over is actually the Detroit Pistons. It's put up or shut up time for Kate Cunningham. So that's Detroit Pistons over 25.5 wins. And then I'm going to fade the Utah Jazz. I like their under there at 29.5 wins.
Good stuff. Andrew O'Connor Watts, what are your NBA win total best bets?
I am also on the Thunder over 56.5 wins. I also really like the Raptors under 30.5 wins. I like the Suns over 47.5 wins. And finally, a little alt under on the Clippers under 36.5 wins. That's plus 190.
Whew. Boy, I want to talk about the Clippers, but we got to start with the Thunder. Let's start up top here because, okay. Number one seed in the Western Conference, they won 57 games last season. It's a tough conference. They had the youngest roster in the league. They won 57 games. Mark Daigneault wins Coach of the Year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander finishes second for MVP. They make it the second round versus the Mavericks. They don't make a trade for a center at the deadline because they wanted to evaluate what they looked like without it to know exactly what they needed. Everyone killed them for it, which was, I said at the time, I was like, they're not speeding up the process. Like, they're going to be patient with this and they want to evaluate. You get more data just by rolling through and seeing what it looks like. So what do? Well, first off, they moved Josh Giddey, who was good for them late in the season, but struggled for much of it and was a liability in the playoffs. They move him for Alex Caruso, thought to be one of the most valuable trade chips in the market, and they don't even have to give up a first-round pick, which, by the way, I spoke to I hadn't checked in with a certain personnel executive this week, and we were just kind of catching up on things, and he was like, how does Sam Presti get Alex Caruso without giving up a pick? Like, every single person is mad about that. Then, in free agency, because they have such a young roster and they have all this cap space, they add Isaiah Hartenstein. We talked about it on our division preview. I'm super high on them. There's all sorts of reasons to be super high on them, but this is such a high number. Watts, let's start with you. This is a high bar, and like we're buying high here. I'm in on it already. I'm in the boat. But as we get close to the season, I'm just like, shouldn't I not be buying so high? It's making me nervous. Talk me into it. Talk me through Thunder.
Yeah, you talk about you want to stay away from those extremes in terms of betting overs for high win total teams, betting unders for low win total teams. But every now and again, there's an exception to that rule for me. I've taken that advice and used it a lot in my handicapping. But to me, this is just not one of those instances where I want to worry about that trend. The OKC this is a floor play for me. I think their floor is extremely high. I think even if we see some injuries, maybe they, barring the season from hell type situation, I think they can withstand injuries and still win a lot of games. I love those acquisitions that you mentioned, Caruso and Hartenstein, bolster a defense that was already number 4 in adjusted defensive rating over on dunks and threes from last season. Giddey, he's probably a little underrated at this point, given all kind of the slander that he's gotten from basketball wise only. I'm not talking about anything else. But I don't really feel like they lose anything offensively by getting rid of Giddey in comparison to how much their defense improves. This is also kind of a Dagnall play as well. He's gone over in all 3 seasons that he's been with the Thunder, that he's been a head coach in the league. And in the last 2 seasons, they've gone over their win total by 14.5 wins on average. So to me, this is, I see the Thunder as still being somewhat undervalued, even at this high number. I know that we're basically buying high essentially, but to me, this reminds me of the Celtics last season where, you saw the high win total and you and Brandon, I was not on the over. I should have been. To me, this is that spot for the Thunder. And yeah, I love the over 56.5.
Okay, good synopsis of kind of like all the reasons to go with it. The idea of it being them still being underrated in the market, I think is it's like an interesting one just because like I think perception wise you're right. Like I do think like the casual fans like really? Like I think we're gonna see a lot of people get closer and be like the Thunder are the favorites? Like OKC's the favorite, Because a lot of people honestly last year were like, wow, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really good. And everyone's like, yes. SGA is in fact quite good. That is accurate. But like the question of it with this high a number of it being still a buy low, like an underrated spot, I have a hard time with. This is since 2012, 13. This is the 13th team that has a win total of 57.5 or greater in the market. Of those teams, they've gone, well, I'll save that for later. We'll see how they've gone in a little bit. I want to hear Albert Wynn and your cap on the Oklahoma City Thunder. This was at the top of your board as well. What do you like about OKC?
Yeah, I would say this is the most logical, the most simple read, but at the same time, it's the scariest read, right? Because we're talking about the youngest team, like Matt mentioned. They were first in the West. They had relatively good injury luck now for a couple years in a row, including their superstar and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Again, you can't really handicap these win totals by predicting or not predicting injuries, but I think you just hope that this team stays healthy and you hope that each player improves by, 1 to 10%. Just that alone should be enough for them to hit their win total. And I think OKC is one of those sleepy towns where other teams go into and don't take them seriously. That may change moving forward because now they are one of the hunted. They made the second round. Potentially they could, make another deep playoff run. But all their acquisitions improved their team. They had gaps from last season. I think Jalen Williams is going to have a big bounce back from his playoff dismal performance. I just think that this team is built for the regular season, and because of their youth, their athleticism, they're going to be able to bring it night to night. And that's things that we have to worry about when we're looking at older teams is not the fact that they're not good, not the fact that they can't make deep playoff runs, but will they get up for games for 82 times, in the year? Whereas OKC, I don't worry about that at all.
I think all the basketball stuff is right? Like they should be awesome. Like a lot of this is their average in the market is 56.5. That's pretty much consensus across the board. There's one 57.5 I found out there. They won 57 last year, so you would have to argue like they're going to be worse this year. Some people have decided to take a contrarian view and be like, I think the offense is going to be worse because of Hartenstein. That really ignores who iHeart is. Like iHeart's not a big body. Like he's not DeAndre Jordan, right? Like he's a big that you can use in pick and roll situations as a passer. He has a float game. He has a short jumper. He is efficient around the rim. Like, he's not stone hands. He has really good hands, and he's maneuverable, and he's shown his value. They also, if they're in a matchup bind versus certain teams, if it's a high leverage spot where it's like they need to get this win versus another opponent that they're competing with for a Western Conference spot, like Denver or the Wolves or the Suns, they can go small. Like, there's no one of the best things, and Watts kind of mentioned this, their redundancy is insanely high. And that's what you want to get through the regular season is, oh no, SGA has a bad ankle and he's got to miss 2 weeks. Okay, good thing that all we're going to do is play awesome defense, have Case and Wallace run point, and our 3 defenders in the backcourt on your wings are Case and Wallace, Alex Caruso, and Lou Dort. Good luck. Like, all the basketball stuff is awesome. Okay, now I'm going to scare the shit out of you. I pulled it back to 56.5. There's 23 teams since 2012 that have had 56.5 or higher on the win total. Not a lot. 23 though, that's a fair amount. 17-6 to the under. Okay. This is a really compelling one for me because this means that it is season contextual. I set up in my system the ability to rank win totals to find out if you are the highest win total, how do you do versus the lowest. Top 10 win totals are 73, 56 and 1, 56% to the under. Okay, you know what? That's good, but it's not terrible. That's not too terrifying. Top 5 are 43 and 23. That's 65%. And top 3 are 27, 14 and 1 at 66%. So 66% of the time since 2012, these have gone under. It's just like, this is not hard stuff to figure out. In every single sport, we have these scenarios, right? Like NFL, it's long been known it's more profitable to bet unders than overs. The same thing overall is true for the NBA. It is more profitable over the last 12 years to bet unders than overs. And if you take the highest, it's very hard to win 55 plus games. It's hard to win 50. Like, over 50 is a tough one. If you go back and you look through those kind of metrics, win totals above 52.5, which is kind of a key number, those are 28 and 15 to the under. Like, there's just all of this history that says that you're not going to get there. I think what's encouraging is we are in a little bit of a different era. And I think that needs to be taken into account. There's this idea of like, well, we're in a quote unquote parity era. That's what everyone kind of thinks is, well, you know, we've had we haven't had a repeat champion. There's no dynasty. So it's like anyone can kind of beat anybody. And that's not really how it is, because the difference is that, and we were talking about this earlier this week in Action Network, if you look at some of the worst teams in the league over the last 20 years, 24 years, in SRS, a huge portion of them come from last season. Because what we're seeing is a strong middle, a top and top in terms of win total production, and then the bottom when you're out of the play-in is extremely low. And we're going to see that even worse this year with the kind of tanking that we're going to see for Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, and the rest of these guys. So I kind of get it. Do any of those stats terrify you, Andrew O'Connor Watts?
They don't, actually. And it's not because I don't think that they're valid stats or that they're not valid. Like, usually I am, you know, I do kind of listen to those kind of trends. But, you know, right before you gave me all these trends, you said the basketball part makes sense. And that's really what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at the fact that, like you said, they won 57 games last year. So we have to assume that they're going to be worse this year when their team got better. I don't really think that many other teams got better in the West. I think, you know, the Timberwolves got worse. The Nuggets got worse. I think the Suns got better. I'm on them as well. But most of these like higher win total teams, I am looking to fade in the West. And that's kind of more what I'm looking at here. I think this team could be a 60-win team. I think we're going to look at other teams struggle while OKC does well because of those things. Like you said, they are built for the regular season. Now, when it comes to winning the championship, I'm a lot more skeptical on that side of things. A lot less than I was last year, but a lot less, you know, a lot more skeptical big picture. But regular season, this is a team that just churns out wins, and they consistently, as Albert mentioned, they consistently get underrated in terms of when people come to play in OKC. Their record against Western Conference teams at home is elite. I'm sorry, I didn't actually bring that up. I can find it while Albert goes, but they have an elite record against Western Conference teams at home, and that basketball side is really more what I'm concerned about in this instance. Those trends that you name, I'm kind of looking to other teams to fill that trend for this season.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, I think it's a relevant point to kind of look at that on that. Albert, what do you kind of think about when we're talking about the buy low, especially from you as somebody that really analyzes the market, the idea of trying to weigh this basketball side versus the trends that we've kind of seen?
Yeah, like I said, OKC for me was not more analytically driven, just to be completely transparent. I just think the fact that the arc of this team, of this franchise, it's still trending upwards. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get regular season wins. But I think that the golden rule for me, whether you're a numbers guy or not, if you're a superstar, so a top 5 player in the NBA, and I think we can all agree that Shea is a top 5 guy, and you're in your physical athletic prime and you play 75 plus games, your team should win 50. So just that alone should get you to 50 wins. Then the addition of, the fact that they have a really, really good supporting cast around him, and they have a really great coaching staff, scheming every single night. So that should be enough, in my opinion, to get the additional 6 or 7 wins. But I think the fact that all 3 of us agree that it's, an overplay is a little bit scary for me, because it's probably, again, I don't have public data on this, but it's probably the public look as well, just because, they won 56, 57 last year. They improved this year. They're a year older. I'm sure everyone has that same mindset, but sometimes keeping it simple does make sense.
You guys have held firm here, so I will give you the good news. Win totals above 52.5, like I mentioned, that kind of key number, which has got a very big difference here, are 28 and 15 to the under. But teams that were top 5 in both offense and defense the year prior, which OKC was, are 4 and 2 to the over. So that's a very small sample, but we see it go the other directional way. Albert kind of hit me up in our chat and asked me how many teams have won 57 and then gone back to 57 plus the year after. There had been 23 of those teams, 9 of them that had won 57 the year before. 9 of them, so it's 9 and 14, had gone 57 plus. I don't have the win total number on that right now. It's going to get pretty small, and once we narrow it down to that kind of level. But I think the key here is, like, 9 and 14 is not good. It's still under 500 for doing that, but I think it does kind of indicate to you, and I do return to that. The Thunder are not just good on one end. They're elite on both ends, and like Watts mentioned, I think that's like a big key here for why I think you can like them. I want to go to another one because we got to keep moving here. Let's go to Albert, and I want to go to this pick, which I took in the win totals draft. Watts played it today. It's a great look. I'm excited to hear your reasoning. I'm glad to have you on the board with us. It's the Utah Jazz under on their win total. What's your handicap?
I just think they're in it for Cooper Flag. Lauri Markkanen is good enough for that team to win 25 to 30 games, but I think they're either going to make a trade and ship him off, which, I mean, they've been talking about that for over a year, or they sit him, right? We've kind of gone through this cycle now with the Jazz where they start out really strong. They're undervalued from a betting perspective early in the season for maybe 15, 20 games. Then they just start losing. And I think Ainge and company, just from the top down, I think they're going to start losing even earlier in this season. So I think there's 2 teams right now that are full on into Cooper Flag as the number 1 pick, and that's going to be the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers. I just believe that Utah is going to be better at tanking than Portland.
Wow. That's a strong kind of comment there. I don't think, like, here's the thing. Like, normally we like edit this out. I think it's okay because the new contract rules are so confusing that it's hard to keep track of everything. And there's always this like, well, actually, and it's like, no, it's okay. Like, we can just correct information. It's okay, because like I'm trying to figure out right now if WCJ, who got extended yesterday, can be traded or not. Markkanen waited until the day after he was eligible to be traded this season, if he had signed it before then, to sign his contract. So Markkanen basically locked himself in based on the extension through the rest of the season. Now they can trade him this summer. And I think your tanking point is dead on, but they're not going to be able to deal him in season. And I don't think that should impact the move here just based off of the numbers. I have them at 18.6. And when I started looking at the roster, like this gets like it gets scary pretty quickly. Now, like there are really good guys on this team. Like Markkanen is really good, and I do believe in Will Hardy and Colin Sexton, who is in the top 100 because of Brandon Anderson and not on mine on the Elite 100, which you can read on Wednesday. Sexton was really good last year, and there's a very good chance that he gets shipped somewhere and is very good wherever he goes. Clarkson, I think, is another candidate to get dealt and wind up having a pretty good season elsewhere. Both of those guys have more value on other teams in exchange for what they'll return to Utah than contributing this season. The only real danger here is that like Markkanen starts on fire and Will Hardy coaches this team up and they get off to an early start, because I don't see any way that this team doesn't end the season with fewer than 35. Now that's a far cry from where we're at 29, right? But it's not crazy to go from 35 to 29. That's 6 wins is pretty easy, especially if they decide to sit Markkanen. The record has been absolutely just cratered. So Watts, I know you like this play too. What do you like about the Utah Jazz under 29?
Yeah, a lot of what you just said, and about the trade pieces, John Collins and Walker Kessler and Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and all of them. I think they're all, good trade pieces for other teams. The scary part is the Will Hardy part, I think. That guy has just taken this team from kind of having no business to be in any games to really competing from night to night. But that said, even last season, we saw them go on this really great run, and then they traded one of the main pieces of that run in Simone Fontecchio to the Pistons. Now, I'm not saying he's like the best player on the Jazz, but one thing that they figured out with that team was the shooting, and just basically just chucking and beating teams that way. And Simone Fontecchio was a big part of that. So we've seen them pivot away from things that are working mid-season, and I think that they're a huge, they're definitely a candidate to do that again. But on top of that, they're just not as good. The roster is just not as good as it has been even last year or the year before. And I think 29.5 is too high.
Yeah. I just think when you kind of look at how this goes, it's hard to get into a space where you can kind of see like a breakout season for this team. I guess maybe if we're going to kind of theorize how this bet loses, right? And I have to write the Utah Jazz season breakdown here in a few days. I think it's probably built off of just like one of the young guys absolutely pops, right? Like you get somebody who comes out of nowhere and is suddenly like very, very good. Isaiah Collier, the rookie. I think Keontae George is another candidate. Like he statistically, his profile is just like, he's like just a guy. Like he's good. Like he's going to have real moments. The film on Keontae, you're like, oh, I see some stuff there. So like if Keontae makes like this huge leap all of a sudden, then we're going to be looking at, oh, okay, this is dead because Keontae George and Lauri Markkanen are now like a baseline that you can kind of get to get past this. So that said, I just think that the under here is a really solid play. I'm totally down with it. Watts, I know that this is your last play, but I think it's the most interesting, so I want to jump to it because to me it's a really fascinating one.
Sure.
We've talked a lot about it in the Action Network Slack, and we'll continue to kind of debate this one. And it's the Los Angeles Clippers, and you have an alt play at 36.5 plus 190. You said, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So the market on the Los Angeles Clippers right now is currently 39.3. There's some 38.5, some 39.5 in the market. This opened, I think, at like 43. I'd have to check that, but I think it opened. I know it opened north of 41. So we've seen this one absolutely get hammered, and that to me is like, this is to me, I think, a good example of whether or not you think that chasing steam in a futures win total market matters. because you're not getting the best of the number. And in fact, you're getting a significantly worse number than what it was at open. This is down. Yeah, I've got it right here. This is down 2.8 wins on average from the open back when I grabbed numbers on August 11th. The Clippers were all the way up at 42. There was a 42 and a half in the market at open. And now we're all the way down at 38 and a half at some spots. And then in the market, 39 and a half in one particular place. Okay, so we've seen steam on this. Why do you feel like there's still wiggle room, and why do you like taking the alt play instead of grabbing those 3 extra wins?
This is a bet on Kawhi availability, and it's a bet on Harden temperament, given that Kawhi availability. I think that it's pretty bad news that we heard Kawhi had a mysterious, or maybe not so mysterious, but a surprise procedure on his knee after the Olympics. He wanted to play in the Olympics, couldn't because of an injury, had the procedure done, and now they're, quote, hopeful that he'll be ready for the start of the season. So now I would rather bet against a Kawhi healthy season. I mean, I take no pleasure in this. I like Kawhi. I think he's a good player. When he's healthy, he's a very fun player to watch. But I don't trust his health. He actually did play 68 games last season, so that's I think probably would surprise some people that he played that many. But I think we've seen cumulative injuries on that knee. I don't think he's going to be fully healthy, even if we do get him playing games. I don't know what his minutes load is going to be like. And now with Paul George gone, I think that that's a massive blow to their depth and to their ceiling as a result. Now, we've seen that in the market. This is a chasing steam situation, but that's also why I want the alt and not the regular under, is because look, if they go, they could go over. Kawhi and Harden that's a good duo, right? If they're healthy and they're locked in, they will easily clear that regular baseline of 39 and a half. But if there's in this kind of nightmare scenario, which I don't think is that crazy to imagine, where Kawhi sits, he comes back, he's not fully healthy, he sits a couple games, maybe he sits for even longer than we expect. Harden is playing with a bunch of guys that he's losing with. He gets disgruntled, he stops playing, he doesn't want to, or he requests a trade. I mean, that is not out of the realm of possibility. We've seen it multiple times now. So that's why I'm going for the alt under and not the regular under of 39 and a half.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think at this point with where we're at on the market, and I'd love to hear from Albert on this too. This is either going to sail over this number in terms of even if they don't have a great season, it's going to be 45, right? If Kawhi somehow gets his knee right, and Harden, who is vowed to be aggressive, and Ty Lue is the coach that everyone says he is, it's going to fly over. But I do think that Watts is right, that if you're I don't like the look of this, why play the 39 and a half or 30? Right now it's 39 and a half. It might be 38 and a half by the time you listen to this, rather than go as low as possible. I think there are other ways to play this too, where you can get last division finishing position, which I think is probably a good kind of option. You don't want to go into worst record, because it's they'll be functional for at least half the season. If the wheels come off, it will come off at mid-season, and then they'll finish out. But also their pick situation is disastrous. So they'll have incentive to try and limit the damage there. But look, I don't mind the idea of basically saying, I really, the part about this I like is honestly the Harden component of just being I don't know that, I don't think James is, okay, James left Houston because Daryl left, and then it was he saw the direction and he got out. He left Brooklyn specifically because of the Kyrie Irving situation with the COVID vaccine. there were specific reasons. I'm not saying that Harden is like a great teammate. I've said this, like, I hate their leadership structure. But I do think, Albert, when we look at this, I guess here's my question. What is your feeling on, all right, this has already been steamed down. I'm going to play an alt under in that direction instead of the baseline on it. What are your thoughts on that, especially in the futures market?
Yeah, I'll keep this really short, Matt. I personally wouldn't chase that type of steam, so it makes sense that Watts is doing an alt under. I would even go even under that, more under that, to be honest. But yeah, to answer your question, from 42 or 41 and a half to now where it is now, I personally would never chase that steam. But I think the biggest point, in my opinion, with the Clippers is I think LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant have normalized the fact that you can still play at elite levels at 35, mid 30s to upper 30s. That's not normal. I think NBA fans need to realize that's not normal. They are abnormal anomalies. Like James Harden is 35. He's not getting better. Kawhi Leonard is 33. He's not getting healthier. So it's a team that you definitely want to fade. With that being said, I think once we start getting into the season and we see how they are game to game, I think they are going to be live dogs when it comes to the spread, because I think they're going to be there's going to be value with a team that that is underplaying what people expect them to do.
One of the things I think is interesting here is the over 44 and a half is plus 250. Now, I don't want to risk getting middled here on like the anti-middle. I don't want to risk it because with my luck, it'll be like they're on pace for 50 wins. They played at a 20 win pace for the rest of the year. And then it's like, oh, it landed just 43 or 44. So I don't want to do it. But I will say, like, the plus 190 is an interesting proposition to set yourself up later, especially if they start out and it's craterous. It looks like, oh man, because I will say, like, this is one where after it's been steamed, if the Clippers struggle out of the gate with Kawhi out, the market's going to overreact. And then like you're going to hear us on Buckets being like, it's time to take it over on the Clippers. Like the market's overreacted, and this gets you ahead of that to provide you with an opportunity to hedge that and provide you a little bit of insurance. So I think it's an interesting kind of setup. Albert, this one doesn't need to be long because I don't know if you know this, but this is basically a Detroit Pistons basketball podcast at this point, as I am so heavily committed to the Detroit Pistons. Although I will say, like, all my play is just strictly on the over. I don't have make the play in. I don't have make playoffs. I don't have division finishing position. I don't have any of that. And I don't want any of that because I'm very much like, I don't know. Like asking this team to win 32 games seems like a lot. But I mentioned how, like, on preseason, I've actually been really encouraged with them. I mentioned that last night when someone else took the Pistons over. What was your specific cap on why you wanted the Detroit over here?
Well, first of all, Matt, I'm a little worried because you and I have aligned now on all three of my wins totals picks. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, hopefully we're 3-0 there. But
you're so fucked, Albert. I'm so sorry.
But there's a few things when I look at the Detroit Pistons. Yes, they can't be bad for this long, for this bad, right? But I mean, they've made a lot of moves in the offseason that they've brought in like real serious NBA players, right? I know the last few years have been kind of weird with Monty Williams. It's been tough in terms of injuries. We don't know if Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can even coexist in the backcourt, but they brought in three good shooters: Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway. Oh, Boyan, right? No, Boyan's no longer there anymore. But Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway, and Tobias Harris, all solid NBA, real NBA players. So I think just having those three in your top 8 is going to improve your team. And then they also made a move with their coach, right? So JB Bickerstaff is coming in. He didn't have a great, start to his head coaching career. And I'm not a big JB fan, especially in the playoffs, because I don't think he can, do adjustments really well. But that's for another podcast. But the last 3 seasons in Cleveland, he's won 53% of his games, 62% of his games, 58.5% of his games. So when he has a solid team, he can coach his team to win regular season games. I think the Pistons, if they don't get to 35 plus this season, you're gonna see them like completely blowed up. And I know I'm like the biggest Cade Cunningham fan like ever in this podcast, but this is year 4. You can't blame on your coaches. You can't blame the situation with your teammates. You can't blame injuries anymore. This is basically put up or shut up time for Cade Cunningham, who I believe is an all-star caliber talent. Can he really, translate into, being a real leader for a franchise and, getting wins for your team? I think so. I actually like the Pistons to, if you don't want to touch the wins totals, you think the value is gone there. I think if you want to do a make playoffs bet, I think that's justified in my opinion.
I can't see him getting top 6, and I can't see him winning. If they're in like the 10-9. And if they're 10, no team's gotten out of the 10 spot yet in the years of the play-in tournament, and I can't see him winning a playoff game on the road. I am content to just be like, got my over, and all I need him to do is get to like 29 wins, and then we're good. Like, that's all I want you guys. Just don't be awful. That's the bar. Just don't be horrible. Please, Pistons. Okay. Let's go back to Watson. He's got 2 more I want to get to. Let's talk Phoenix, who, by the way, are up 18 in preseason play versus the Detroit Pistons. I'm not really worried about that because this is the first. By the way, fun thing for preseason, if you're listening, pay attention to the second game after the second game that a team plays if they played the day before yesterday, right? So if they've got the normal NBA, you play day off play. There's a couple of those spots in preseason. The first time teams get hit with that in preseason, those guys are like, nope. They look absolutely wretched. Like Detroit looked really good the other night. Look horrible tonight. All right, Watts, give me the cap on Phoenix. They're going to be a popular play, I think, next week in our Best Bets episodes. Why are you on the Phoenix over?
I was on their under last season. I thought they were overvalued based on the win total. It was under 47.5. Now, that doesn't really matter for this season, but they made some really key adjustments, and they made 3 transactions that I think are net positives for them, 4 actually. So they brought in Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, Mason Plumlee, and probably most importantly, Coach Mike Budenholzer for this season. Say what you want about Bud in the playoffs as a coach in general, but that guy wins regular season games. I also think, his style as a coach is good for this team. They want to shoot more threes. Acquisitions like Tyus Jones and Monte Morris are great for that. They need ball handlers that can shoot. Tyus Jones last season, 41.4% from 3 on 30.9 attempts. Previous season, 37% on 4 attempts. Monte Morris, 42.4% from 3 on less volume, 2.2. But season before that, 3.3 attempts, 4.2 attempts, and shooting in the high 30s in both of those seasons. Coach Bud, career 60% regular season win percentage. That's an improvement from Vogel. And he was also 3-2 to the over with Milwaukee in terms of those win totals. If we look at Bradley Beal, he only played 30 games last season. I was pretty low on that move in general, but when it comes to playing that second season, I think there's time for them to have meshed a little bit. I mean, part of why I like this, or part of why I didn't like it as sort of a ceiling move, was the redundancy and the tendency to just shoot mid-range for all 3 of their best players, KD, Booker, and Beal. But what that is good for is if there is an injury, kind of being able to, it's almost like top end depth, right? By having these 3 guys that have the same skill set. So by actually bolstering their literal depth in Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, and Mason Plumlee, having that top end talent depth of Bradley Beal, who hopefully will play some more games, 47.5 feels a little bit too low. I think they could easily win 50 games. And I'll take the over for the Suns when they won 47 last season. So Give me the over.
Look, no, I'm with you, and the more that I've kind of done the analysis, it's funny that you mentioned the schedule, because that's a big part of kind of where I got to on this team was when I started to look at, like, I have an overall power rating that determines my win projection for these teams, and then I have one based off of schedule, and my schedule one is like 2 wins worse, and so now we're talking about an even bigger gap between where the win total is and where it was. And so I think that there is like a little bit of value. I think that's really good analysis there on what the schedule looks like and how it can put them in the hole. You know, Darko's talked about putting more emphasis on defense. We'll see if that pays off. They've started to have a little bit of injuries already early on. We'll see what happens there. But I definitely think, look, I think this is one where I don't mind whichever direction people take on it. I really don't. I think it's like, this is not a team where you should be like, yeah, it's probably the numbers right. It's either very wrong and you think they're going to be way better and they're going to be a play-in team, maybe a playoff team, or it's going to be way worse and they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Now I, being the profound coward I am going to go ahead and just stay away and just leave that to you fine folks. But I do think I like the cap there from Andrew O'Connor Watts. That's going to do it for Buckets. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back on Friday with Brandon Anderson's. He's going to do his awards. And so you're going to have lots of tasty bets from Brandon. He goes psycho on these awards. He does such a good job. Makes a lot of money on it. So make sure to tune in for that next week. It's Best Bets episode. Week after, season starts. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, for helping us out tonight, even through some audio issues, as well as Tito Benach and the video team getting this up at youtube.com/The Action Network. Download the Action Network app. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.